What's up, Breakaway? Hey guys, my name is David. Like he just said, I've been on staff at Watermark for the last 13 years and working with the Porch. I am a member of the Fightin' Texas Aggie class of 2009, a whoop! And I am always glad to be back in Aggie land. I've been married to a Aggie girl for almost 10 years. This is my wife, Callie. Know a little bit about us. There is two of our kids, that's Crew and Monroe, and not pictured or pictured in a different way is our newborn son, because that was taken in October, and there is Bear, who is just the cutest cheeks for days. Looks like he's got rubber bands on his wrists all the time and just the best. But what I want to start with is a little bit of an intro into some of my world that'll give us maybe setting the table for what I want to talk about tonight. Because I have a 6-year-old son, one thing that is true about 5, 6-year-old boys is they are obsessed with Legos. Now, most of you guys probably haven't used or played with Legos in a while. I'm assuming that's not exactly going to be something you're going to use as a pickup line. Can I show you my Lego set? But if you remember, back in the day, you would do Legos, and your dad or your parents may help you put those things together, and my son will come, and he wants to put Legos and build things and put them together, and he's just kind of obsessed with that. In order to build something like this is a car made out of Legos that Ramsey, my assistant, built on the way here as a form of torture in the car. And in order to do this, you have to have a couple things. You have to have the Legos pieces, and then you have to have the instructions. Now, what happens when you're 5 is you are very prone to lose something. And my 5 and 6-year-old son now will often misplace or lose or leave something behind, and this will consistently happen with different Lego sets that he has. And so I will be forced to try to construct along with him something that is so complex with hundreds of pieces, but we no longer have the instructions. And so what do? If you want to get to this destination, if you will, in order to do that without the instructions, I'm left with really only one option, which is the picture on the box. And so I take that and I try to reverse engineer and figure out which piece goes where and what attachment goes where. Now, what does that have to do with what I want to talk about tonight? Well, in a similar way, when it comes to the topic I want to discuss, which is dating for followers of Jesus, we in the Bible are not given step-by-step instructions, if you will, as it relates to dating. In other words, dating wasn't around in Bible times. It's a relatively new invention. The Bible doesn't talk about dating, just like it doesn't talk about TikTok or Instagram or Netflix. But it has a lot to say about the picture of marriage, about the type of spouse to look for, about the process of wise evaluation. And so although it doesn't give us the step-by-step instructions, it gives us the picture of the destination and the place to look towards, and then the principles that we apply to the process of dating. So as I've already said, the Bible doesn't give step-by-step instructions on and then Joseph took Mary to Olive Garden and he asked for this, but it has a lot to say about love and marriage. And in working with young adults for the past 10 years, I have seen so much unnecessary pain be brought into their life because of the subject of dating. And candidly, as someone a little farther down the road, I don't want that for you. God doesn't want that for you. And I think in your heart of hearts, you don't want that for you. And the good news is He's given us a lot of helpful principles so that doesn't have to be the case. And so tonight, I want to cast a vision or paint a vision for what it looks like to date as followers of Jesus. If you're not a follower of Jesus, this isn't for you. There'll be stuff that's helpful, and candidly, if you apply it, it'll make you in the top 10% of daters out there. But for those of us who are following Jesus, there's some real clear instructions that we can begin to apply. So I want to walk through 3 things as it relates to dating, specifically when to date, who to date, and then how to date. And I'm gonna fly, because we've got a lot of ground to cover. And the first 2 are gonna be quicker than the others. We're just gonna take scriptural principles and apply them as it relates to the process of dating or evaluating, is this person a potential spouse? So if you have a Bible, we'll be in a lot of different verses, and they should all be up on the screen. But I'm gonna start first with the subject of when to date. When is the right time? Is there an appropriate time? Because most of us go through life and we don't think, oh, there's an appropriate time. The appropriate time was whenever I meet her or whenever I meet him. And the scriptures say there's 2 times, or there's 2 ingredients that you need in order to date faithfully as a follower of Jesus. And those are when you are fully committed to Jesus and you are fully ready to commit. When you are fully committed to Jesus, let's talk about that. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, in Ephesians chapter 5, it says this. Again, as painting a picture of marriage, fully committed to Jesus. Husbands, you are to love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. In the same ways, husbands should love their wives as they love their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. In other words, the biblical command for husbands or for spouses is to love and care for their spouse in a way that reflects how Christ loved and laid down his life for the church. How does that relate to you? If you're a follower of Jesus, if you have not fully committed your life, or Jesus is not the epicenter of your life, you're not in a place where you are ready to date. If you don't get the relationship piece with God right, you will never get the relationship with a girl right. And so are you at a place where you are fully surrendered, or you are in a healthy place with Jesus? Maybe some of you, you're relatively new in your faith, and it's just not the right season for you to get into a dating relationship. Because God is at work in your life and he's growing it, and introducing someone that may not share those same values, or introducing any relationship may be a distraction from what God and the foundation that he's building in your life. So when you are fully committed to Christ, in 1 Corinthians 7, it talks about singleness. It says, this is a season uniquely that God has given you to secure undivided devotion to the Lord. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 39. I don't know if they have that up on the screen, but if you're in a place where maybe you just have just gotten out of a dating relationship and it was toxic, and you guys introduced sex way earlier than you should have, which is marriage. It was just dysfunctional. You know, God may have a season where you just need to mark the calendar and say, I'm not even considering this for 6 months, because I want to make sure I am fully committed to my first love, which is Jesus. So the second one, quickly, is when you are ready to fully commit. In other words, if you're at a place where, and this is gonna sting some of you, but marriage is off the table in any sort of near future. You're looking down the road and you got plans and you're gonna go to grad school and you're just going, there's no way I would even consider marrying someone for the next 7 years. It would be unwise and candidly unloving to introduce a relationship that is either just gonna have prolonged sexual temptation for years and years and years, and also confuse the person that you're dating, because they're gonna be wondering, hey, when is this thing gonna turn a corner? And so if marriage is completely off the table for you, and I'm not saying you date somebody tonight for the first date and you gotta know whether you're marrying them tomorrow or not. I'm saying if it is entirely outside of the realm of possibility, then it would be unwise to enter into a dating relationship. In Proverbs chapter 24, 27, it says this: put your outdoor work in order and get your fields ready. After that, build your house. In other words, make sure you're able to commit to something before you decide to get into something. Jesus would say in Luke chapter 12, hey, make sure you know the cost before you get into something. It says this: suppose one of you wants to build a tower. This is Luke chapter 14. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and you're not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and he wasn't able to finish. If marriage is not in the near future, or if marriage is off the table, dating should be off the table. And that may seem unrealistic, seem crazy, but the scripture says you're gonna put yourself in a place where you're gonna be constantly tempted to awaken love before it's time, and you just weren't made for extended years and years of that temptation. My wife, a couple years ago, They used to do this thing on Zillow, which is like a real estate app where you could do something called Make Me Move. What's Make Me Move? It's basically something that you could sign up for that was saying to the world, I'm not selling my house, but if you give me this price, we'll move. And I had done that before with our first house, and eventually Zillow took that off and you couldn't do that anymore. And so I went to try to do that again because there's probably something wrong with the way that I think, and I couldn't find the Make Me Move. And so I was like, you know what I'll do? I'm just gonna throw our house on the market and put in all capital letters, this is really just Make Me Move, and so we're not that interested, but if you hit this number, we may. And my wife came home and she said, did you put our house on the market for sale? And I was like, yeah, but it's not exactly what you think. I mean, we're not, exactly gonna move, but if somebody gets us that number, babe, we'll move. I'm just trying to get you a house that you love, which always works in a conflict. You blame it on the other person. And for the next 7 days, my phone just went off the hook of people saying, hey, are you interested in moving? Are you interested in moving? Are you interested in moving? And it's a clear lesson that, hey, if you're not ready to move, it should go without saying, you shouldn't list your house for sale. And in the same way, if you're not ready to move in the direction towards marriage, you should not list yourself for sale or for availability in a dating relationship. So the first aspect really quickly is, hey, when to date is when you are fully committed to Jesus Christ. He is at the center. You are secure in that. Your life has a very clear connection to your relationship with your Savior. And then when you are able and ready to fully commit to someone. So that's when to date. Now, who to date? As it relates to the subject of who is the type of person that you should be looked for, and there's 3 characteristics that the scriptures give us that I want to walk through, and one of them should almost go without saying, but sadly, in my experience, is often overlooked. And I think there's some reasons, and I'll explain why. The first characteristic that you should be looked for is someone who loves Christ. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul says this as it relates to somebody entering into another relationship. He says, verse 39, he or she is free to marry anyone they wish, but only if they love the Lord. Read it again. He or she, talking about believers in Jesus, is free to marry anyone they wish as long as they love Jesus. That Paul would say, if they don't have at the epicenter, man, they love Jesus above anything else, they will not be able to love you in an appropriate way because they haven't had that relationship form and get right. He doesn't say, only if you love the Lord so much, it kind of is enough for both of you. It doesn't say if he grew up in church and knows a couple verses. It says only if he loves the Lord. Now let me ask you a question. How do you know if someone loves something? I think if we were sitting down, you would probably give answers like, well, they talk about it. Like, how do you know? Some of you guys in the room are just Aggie obsessed. You're on TexAgs. You know the recruiting class. You know what's coming in. You know, like the recruits, the 5 stars, the Jimbo. You got it all down. And you go around places and you talk about it. And other people know that you're talking about it. And other people know that you got a subscription to TexAgs that you share with 6 other people because you're invested into that. And you can't not talk about it because you love that. That's not a bad thing. But when somebody loves something, some of you guys love certain TV shows and you'll constantly bring that up, or you love certain products or shopping at certain stores, and people who are close to you, they know it because you make sacrifices financially. You talk about it verbally. It's hard to be around you and not know the things that you love and that I love. And if the person you're starting a relationship with doesn't give off the vibe that, man, he's just always talking about Jesus. He's always talking about the way God is at work in his life. He's always talking about how he was serving in this church or this ministry in this moment. It may be that they say they're a Christian, but they don't really love the Lord. And so the first person characteristic that you're looking for is somebody who loves Jesus. And this is so important, candidly. And let me speak to those of you who may be considering moving your relationship to the next phase. Or maybe you're looking at the ring by spring, or you hope it's going to happen, and you're considering if that's what God is going to do. People say the phrase, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. That's not true at all. You will pick your family. And dating is the process by which you're going to do that. Let me be really more specific. You are picking the mother of your children. You're picking in the dating process and deciding to marriage. And I've seen so many relationships, candidly, Aggies that came together and people in their life didn't support the relationship and they never should have dated and they never should have got married and now they're divorced. And they picked the family of their children. And it's the most heartbreaking thing in their life. And you're gonna pick your family. I mean, think about the power of the decision your parents in getting together, the impact that has had on your life. Some of the greatest pains that you can trace in your story, because maybe your story is like mine of children of a broken home or parents who divorced. Some of the greatest pain you have in your story and in your life is connected to the decision your parents made. And we don't really think of them that way. We think of our parents as kind of old and he's bald and, so irrelevant. But at one point, your parents were young and they were thinner and had hair on their head and they were driving around, Tom and Barb in Tom's Bronco and there were red flags all over the place. And some of the greatest pain that was introduced is a product of that. And God's not done with your story and he's not done with their story. But you will pick your family and you cannot be careful enough about that decision of who you are going to join arms with. So the second thing to look for is, are they someone who loves the Lord? And do they have a character about them that attracts you? Like we think characteristics when we think of attraction. We think if she looks this way, he's got this hair, he's this tall, he's this build, she looks like this. All of those things are not necessarily bad things. But if character, who they are, doesn't attract you, you should be concerned. In Proverbs chapter 12, verse 4, it says this: a spouse of noble character, speaking about wives in this context, but it applies to both, is her husband's crown. But a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. Proverbs 31, verse 10 says, a wife or a spouse of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies, which were extraordinarily valuable at that time. What the writer is saying is that someone who has character, you can't put a price tag on that. And we think in terms of characteristics, but if what attracts you to them doesn't include on the list their character, they are not someone you should date. Because all of those physical characteristics and external attraction, even secular studies say that those last about 18 months and then they fade. Which answers the question that a lot of us have when we look at Hollywood and you look at celebrities and you look at people who were dating some of the most attractive people in the world and then they have an affair and you're thinking, how did you cheat on him? How did you cheat on her? It's because physical characteristics don't last. And a relationship that is built on solely that at the exclusion of someone's character won't last. Which is why the Bible hammers, you need to look for somebody that has character. I mean, the truth is, as eventually all of you have already discovered and will discover, like we are all in a losing game against gravity, where bodies change and hair moves to places it shouldn't and looks change and babies happen and scars, C-section scars. And if your relationship is built on those things, it's built on something that will not last. And so does character attract you? Are they someone who loves Christ and their character is something that attracts you? And then finally, number 3, there's someone that you enjoy being with. They're a companion. Why do I say this? One of the words in Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament was written in, used for a spouse, is the Hebrew word halup. It's a word for friend, for companion. that there's someone that you enjoy spending time with, and it should go without saying, but the number of dysfunctional relationships where people get into, and it's highs and lows, and they really don't just enjoy the plain moments of life, should have caused them concern that I don't think I want to spend the rest with this person. Because a lot of marriage, when you're young and, it's beforehand, you're thinking, dude, girls are thinking it's always one long conversation and just a walk on the beach, and guys are thinking it's just swinging from the chandelier sex, and that's what it is all the time. The truth is, marriage is a lot more simple than that. It's just a lot of time together. We were talking about raising kids and talking about planning for what's coming up with school. Are they someone you enjoy, truly? Do you enjoy being with them and talking about life and just being around them? Because one of the words the Bible says to look for is a companion in life. Now, you notice I didn't say someone you are to look for is someone you are physically attracted to. Why? Because no matter what I say about that, it's not going to change anything that you do. In other words, if I was to say, you want to look for somebody you're attracted to, nobody in the room is like, I had no idea. Oh my gosh, I have to look for someone I'm attracted to? It's going to mean whatever it means to you. And so regardless of what I say, it's going to be as important to you as it is. But it should not be the most important thing. Because as the proverb we just read says, beauty and that charm, it is fleeting. But someone who fears the Lord, what does it mean to fear the Lord? It's like the idea of fearing not having oxygen. That I don't fear it because I'm afraid of oxygen. I fear it because I need it for life. That I'm to look for someone who sees God as necessary for their life. As it relates to who to match with, often we think that there's this perfect someone that completes us, and the Bible just says it's way more simple than that. My son will play this matching game because he's not just obsessed with Legos, he loves dinosaurs. And we have these dinosaur cards that there's like 2 of every kind. So there's 2 T-Rexes and 2 Triceratops and 2 whatever other dinosaurs there are. And we will flip one over and you kind of look and no, that's not it. And so you flip the next one and you're looking for that perfect match. Oftentimes people think this is how dating should work, that I'll find this perfect match. And it's just more simple than that. You're looking for someone who loves Christ, who has character that attracts you, and who you enjoy being with, or is a companion. And if you found those things, congratulations, they're a potential person for you to date. And if they don't, they're not. Okay, so that's who to date, then when to date, and now I want to fly through most practically how to date, which I think is probably the most important aspect of the whole conversation. Because all of us are constantly being sold a lie through music we listen to, television shows, social media, on how to treat people of the opposite sex. And I want to walk through and give you handholds. Remember when I said the top 10%, that if you will apply these, guys, if you're a guy, you will shine like the top 10% of men out there, and you're going to get married, and I want credit. Send me a wedding invitation someday. And ladies, if you will apply this, it will make you someone who sits in the top 10% of women as it relates to dating, because those who date according to the world are everywhere, which is why dysfunctional relationships are everywhere. And I don't think you want that. And God doesn't want that. So let's fly through how to date very quickly. And before, as I set that up to explain why this is so important, when I was 16 years old, I inherited my sister's Pontiac, 1992 Pontiac Sunbird convertible. And you may be thinking, oh, isn't that kind of cool, the Pontiac, the Firebird? No, this was the much less cool cousin, the Sunbird, that was incredibly feminine. And it had all different problems with it that were wrong, but beggars can't be choosers, and you get a car. And so I got a car, and this is what I drove for the next 3 years. But before I was able to drive this car, I had to go through something called driver's ed. You guys are Aggies, man. I knew you would know the answer to that. I had to go through driver's ed. Why? Why do you go through driver's ed? Well, everyone in society knows, hey, there's a lot of potential danger to put somebody behind a car that could end their life or someone else's life. So in order for us to minimize the danger and the collisions that could happen, we are going to require as a society them to complete a driver's ed course. Now, what does that have to do with dating? It's around that same time in life where you've just kind of gone through puberty. A lot of us are introduced to dating for the first time. But unlike driver's ed, where this incredibly dangerous thing, you're required to get trained and educated on it as it relates to dating. That has all kind of casualties that come with it. Usually not physical, but certainly emotional and certainly spiritual. There is no dater's ed. And so most of us learn and are trained on how to date from the world. And so I want to walk through what God says as it relates to dating and applying just wisdom principles as it relates to dates. So number one, on how to date. Guys, ask girls on dates. Let me explain what I mean. Thank you for that. Use the word date, not you up, not want to hang this weekend, not got anything going on, not you want to chill. Use the word date. It's confusing, and the Bible says you and I are to honor one another and show preference to one another and to treat one another and show deference to one another. Consider it a command of God to put the needs of other people before yourself. So as it relates to communicating with her, you honor her by bringing clarity to what you're asking her. And I'm telling you, if you do this, it is gonna set you apart. You're gonna go up to her and you say, hey, this weekend, I would like to take you on a date. And then you tell her exactly what you want to do. I'd like to pick you up for dinner, and then I'd like to go to the 12th Man Memorial, or I'd like to take you. It's a powerful thing. It's clearly not in my notes. You tell her, this is exactly what I want to do. Why does that matter? Because when you approach her and you're asking her and you just say, hey, you got anything going on this Saturday? She doesn't know what you're asking. Like, you want to know my schedule? She doesn't know that you're asking her, hey, I want to take you on a date. You honor her by bringing clarity to that relationship. And then you give her exactly what you want to do. Not, hey, Saturday, got anything that night? You say, I want to do this. You've had hours at least to think about it. She's reacting in 13 seconds to what you're asking her. And so you honor her by giving her clarity on exactly the ask. In other words, you've been thinking about it for days. You saw her. You're like, man, it's almost finished. This class is over. I'm going to go. No, not today. And then the next day comes and you're going to do it today. You're texting your guys. Hey, be praying. I'm about to ask Sarah out. And then, nope, I ended up not doing it. And then finally you ask the question. You've been thinking about it for 3 weeks. And she's going, oh, man, I don't even know. I honor her by giving her the specifics on what you are asking. So it's number one. I got to move quick. Number two. Girls, say yes to dates. Man, it is getting rowdy. What do I mean by that? I mean, say yes to dates, not you up, not wanna chill, not got some things going on if you wanted to hang with us. If somebody asks you that question, you look at them and you say, are you asking me on a date? Or if I'm up? And you require that they treat you with honor and clarity. It's my opinion now, this next part. I think if a godly guy asks you out, and he's somebody that meets those criteria, that you know he's got character. He's someone who loves Jesus. You may not know if how much you enjoy because you just haven't spent time with it. It's my opinion. I would give a godly guy a date. I went down that hill. Well, part of the problem is girls are always like, guys never ask girls on dates, and girls never say yes to dates. And so girls say yes to dates. Okay, number three. Before that, I note that as it relates to guys, the questions come up like, can I DM her? Can I, what's in bounds here? And let me answer that. Sure. Is it best? No. I'll rank them. Best, in person. Second best, on the phone. Third best, you got her phone from some random stranger and you called her. And fourth best, or way down there at the bottom, would be DM. So, You ask, and that's gonna require risking rejection. And ladies, this is where it's hard for guys, is we are afraid of being rejected. And to the guys in the room, if you ask a godly girl and she says no, listen to me. I am so proud of you. Because you know what you did? She may not have said yes, but you flexed the honor muscle. You flexed the courage muscle. And you said, man, I'm gonna ask this girl. She seems like a godly person, and I'm gonna choose to ask. And you risked rejection, and I am so proud of you. 1 Corinthians 16:13 says, be strong, act like men, let everything you do be done in love. And you allowed, through that clarity and how you asked her, it to be done in love. All right, number 3. This has been said the entire time, but honor them. Seek to leave them better than you found them. Romans 12:10 says, be devoted to one another in love. Speaking to Christians, honor one another above yourselves. This looks like communicating clearly. This looks like, hey, if you're the guy, I'm gonna lead in a way that gives you clarity on the relationship. I'm gonna seek to never leave you wondering, like, are they a thing? Are they just talking? Are they interested? Are they just friends? Is he dating somebody else? I'd like to take you on a date. And then maybe after a few dates or a season and you decide, man, I want this person I want to exclusively date them. You know what you do? You sit them down and you have what's called a DTR. What's a DTR? You define the relationship. And I'm gonna sit there and let me just give you a heads up. It's gonna be awkward. Your hands are gonna be shaking. You're gonna be sweaty. You're gonna be praying, guys. And you're doing it right. And you say, I would like for you to be my girlfriend. And then she has a chance to respond and say, I would like that too. No, I don't know who you are. Or hopefully that doesn't end up being said. Or I'd like to pray about it. But you drive clarity into the relationship so she's not wondering. And here's where I see this relationship going. And I want to continue to get to know you. And if I'm not into it, I'm not going to leave you wondering. I'm going to communicate and I'm going to honor you. And then both sides expect them to honor you. You are so valuable, Jesus would give his life on the cross for you. 1 Peter chapter 3 says, you are a daughter of God Almighty. And if you allow someone to treat you dishonorably, you will think you're a dishonorable person. That you're not worthy of being treated with honor and dignity. And you'll just sit there and enable. And my heart breaks when I hear that. Because you are of such extraordinary value. God would bleed out on a cross for you. And so you demand that they treat you with honor. And you treat them with honor. Number 5, in the whole process, on both sides, guard your heart. This is cliche in Christian circles, but it is not practiced by Christians who find it cliche. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, guard your heart above everything else. Think about that verse. So Solomon wrote it. I don't even know if we have it in my notes, but Solomon wrote it, chapter 4, Proverbs, verse 23. He says, above everything else. Solomon was called the wisest man who ever lived. He wrote all of these Proverbs. He wrote the book of Song of Solomon. He wrote all of the Ecclesiastes, and he says, above every other instruction I could give you, guard your heart, because everything you do in life flows from your heart. And so that means I'm not going to mentally take this relationship further than either one of us have verbally expressed it is. I'm not going to be picking out our children's names on our first date or picking out the wedding dresses or the tux early in the relationship if that's going to feed, and it will feed, something unhealthy. That there's a responsibility to preserve and protect one another's hearts. That looks like emotionally. It looks like sexually. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 12 says, you and I are to, or men are to treat sisters in Christ like they're your sisters. And so I'm going to be protective, and I'm going to preserve that, and I'm going to guard and seek to guard my heart and guard their heart. Number 6, date one person at a time. This should go without saying, but But for whatever reason, it doesn't. And so Philippians chapter 2 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition, but with humility, consider others more important than yourselves. And it is not loving or considering others before themselves to be jumping around from guy to guy or from girl to girl. Am I saying you can't go on a date next week because you went on one date with the guy this week? No. But communicating clearly with the guy that you're dating or the guy that you're going on a date with and the guy that you just went on a date with. That you and I are to honor one another, which could boil up all of the scripture's instructions. Number 7, date in community. Date in community. What do I mean by community? I mean that you should have other believers in your life who are able to speak into the relationship, that are able to hold you accountable, that are able to ask questions and see blind spots that you may not see. The book of Song of Solomon I referenced a second ago, it talks about this couple and how everyone in their life, they looked on their relationship and they just celebrated it. And they were so for it. It said their love is better than wine. It's better than the party. That they had people around them celebrating this relationship happening. Do you have people in your life, if you're in a dating relationship, who you can open up to, who are speaking into that relationship? And this is one of the greatest protections that you can have. And I have seen people have their marriage unravel. And looking back, it's because in their dating life, they were so isolated. It was them and these two, and they got a song, and it's us in the world, and we just love each other. And, you know, the hills are alive with the sound of music when I'm with them. And yet everyone looked on and was like, he's not good for you. Had anybody been around, they would have said, bro, that girl's poison. This is toxic. This is not normal behavior. And so do you have people in your life? One of the greatest protections God gives us is other believers in your life that you know are to date in community. Number 8, don't have sex. Because to quote Mean Girls, if you do, you will get pregnant and die. No, that's not at all the reason. But oftentimes that's what Christians hear, is that don't have sex because sex is not awesome. No, sex is amazing. God created it to be amazing. Proverbs chapter 5, God, the inventor of sex, reads this. Some of you guys are gonna get this tattooed as your favorite verse ever because it says, rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. You think God's against sex? May you always be intoxicated with her love. Before Beyonce ever came out with Drunken Love, God had already written it 2,000 years ago. It's true, 3,000 years ago. May you be drunk in love with your wife. That's what he just said. Why would you be drunk with another man's wife or someone who's not your wife or someone who's not your husband? And embrace the bosom, it's a word we don't use anymore, of a wayward woman. The reason why it's such a bad idea to introduce into the dating relationship is God has said it's intoxicating. It's like alcohol. And anytime you're making important decisions in life, introducing alcohol into the equation is not a helpful source of evaluating. And that's what he just said. When you introduce sex, it's intoxicating. It's like putting drunk goggles. It inhibits your ability to evaluate accurately. Is this someone that I should marry? Or is it just someone that I'm so caught up because we introduced intimacy, sex, when we never should have? And it's keeping us in a relationship that had we not, it would have ended a long time ago. But now we just feel such a soul tie. I can't imagine not moving forward. And God's not done with you. I don't want you to hear shame and guilt, but I do want you to experience God's wisdom behind why introducing that can be so destructive and put you into a relationship that you never should have been in. Number 9, don't date forever. That there's this new thing where people will be in dating relationships for years and years and years. I mean, I work with young adults. It's like, you guys have been dating 6 years. There are children alive today. My kids are as old as your dating relationship. You weren't made to perpetually date, which is why I started with Are you in a place where you can fully commit to that person? And then finally, don't be afraid to exit. Dating is a path that leads and should lead to a promise. That's a wedding. It's you, white dress, him tux, standing there. A path to a promise that leads to a lifelong pursuit. If on the path you begin to recognize this is not someone that I want to spend my life with, or there's some serious ways that I don't think God is honored by this relationship, I'm not sure they're going to be the type of wife or husband or mother or father, or we just don't share the most important aspects, that you courageously decide, I think it's time for the relationship to end. It may not even be the end forever. It just may be that God is saying, this is not the one and this is not the time. And so don't be afraid to end the relationship. So that's who to date. Somebody who's committed to Christ and when you're ready to fully commit. How to date. Who to date. When to date, who to date, which is somebody who loves Jesus. They love Christ. Their character attracts you. And they're a lifelong companion. And then the steps of how to date. Let me close by saying this. Anytime you talk about love and relationships, there's something that happens that I don't think is of the Spirit of God. And that people listening will feel such shame and guilt because of the story and the decisions and that relationship and the sexual history and just all of the things. You look at this list and you go, man, like me, when I was in college and certainly when I was in high school going, man, I feel like I've done everything wrong that God would have of me. The Lego situation is really interesting because my son, there will be times where because, especially when he was 4 and 5, he couldn't put it all together. He would take all those pieces and he's unable to take them and put them together and figure out how to make things work. And so what does he do? He brings those pieces and he brings them to his dad and he says, I can't do this. Will you help me? And his dad will sit there and I begin to become the Lego person. And it's like putting a tiny IKEA project together and I'll put all of these together. I think some of us in the room tonight, what God wants you to hear more than anything is he's not done. The shame that you feel is not of him. But like a child deciding, hey, I don't have what it takes to make something and to get to this destination, to make a beautiful thing. I can't do that on my own. And the good news is God isn't asking you to, but he is asking you to come and say, hey, I'm gonna put into your hands and declare, I don't have what it takes to make a beautiful marriage. I don't have what it takes to be the type of person that loves a wife like Christ loved the church, but you do, and you have a heavenly Father that takes ashes and brings beauty from them, and he's inviting you tonight to surrender over, hey, here's my dating life. It's too important of a thing for me to take it and try to do it all on my own. I don't have what it takes. And that posture will put you in the position for God to write a love story no matter your past. Greater than you could ever imagine, but you have to decide, man, God, I surrender. Even the relationship I'm in right now, if it's not what you want, it's not what I want. And so God, I surrender it. All the different ways that I've dated dysfunctionally, man, I just surrender all of it to you, and I'm gonna trust what you say about who to look for, when to date, and how to date. And when you do that, you're gonna see him write a love story better than one you could imagine. Some of you, the invitation for you tonight is not just surrender dating, it's surrender your life, because you've never had a moment where you actually trusted in Jesus. What do I mean by that? You've never had a time where you actually said what Christians believe, which is, Jesus, I'm not gonna try to be good and earn my way to heaven for you or earn a relationship with you. I'm believing and accepting what the Bible teaches, and this is what Christianity teaches. A lot of people believe Christianity teaches good people go to heaven, bad people go to hell. That's not what Christianity teaches. It teaches forgiven people go to heaven, and there's only one way to get forgiveness. It's by trusting Jesus on the cross, paid for every sinful action, every sexual sin, every abortion in the room, every look of pornography, everything broken in your life and my life, paid for. past, present, and future. And your moment of surrender is not just a dating life, because you're never gonna get a relationship with a guy or girl right if you don't have a relationship with God right. Is to say, God, I believe that, and I receive that. You paid for me. And tonight is your night.